Chess YouTube, what is happening? In this video, a very young Magnus simply annihilates Vishy Anand, one of the greatest players of all time, and this game took place in the 2008 Amber Rabbit tournament when Magnus was just 17 years old, not even an adult. Young Magnus here simply annihilating Vishy Anand in spectacular fashion. Let's dive right in. All right, in the game, Magnus here, playing as white, does not open e4 or d4, instead opens one c4, the so-called English opening. Now, black does go e5, the king's English, and we're off to the races. Now here, Magnus has a few different ideas. The main lines for white include g3 and knight c3. In the game, Magnus, the greatest player of all time, opts to go g3, intending a fast fianchetto of his bishop. Now, Vishy, how does he want to respond? There are a few main lines. Knight f6 is very common, c6, and so on. And in the game, Vishy plays the more combative option, that is simply c6, intending a fast d5. And if Vishy can get in those moves unopposed, he would have a massive pawn center and maybe even a better game out of the opening. Of course, Magnus, he sees this, and he's got two main ways to respond. Knight to f3, attacking e5, and d4, also attacking e5. And in the game, Magnus here plays the latter option, that is simply d4, breaking in the center immediately. Sorry, d4 here, breaking in the center immediately. Now, this move is very, very strong, and it has one key idea. If black does take on d4, white can recapture with the queen like this. Queen takes d4, and the queen will be on d4 for a very long time, as the black knight on b8 cannot go to c6. That is the strength of this move. Vishy, he sees this, he knows this, and he counters it with the very ambitious idea of e4 gaining even more space in the center. Vishy here trying to go d5, and if he can get d5 in, he would have a massive, beautiful pawn center and maybe even an edge. And again, Magnus, he sees this, and he counters immediately with the very ambitious idea of d5, gaining space himself and threatening d6. If he can get d6 in on the board, it would simply clamp down on the black center and king side and make it very, very hard for him to ever castle king side and develop. Now, Vishy, how does he want to respond? In the game, he plays the move knight to f6, and this already may be a little bit of a mistake. Vishy ignoring the threat of d6, and here Magnus, young Magnus, if he wants to, he could go d6, again, clamping down on the king side immediately. Instead, Magnus here, he plays a quiet move, bishop g2, letting Vishy off the hook, and Vishy does correct his mistake. He plays the move bishop b4, flying out with the bishop. White here, his king is under check. He blocks the attack with simply bishop d2, and now Vishy queen to e7. A very strong move. The idea being is very simple. He's clamping down on d6. Now, here, the bishop and the queen both control the square. Therefore, d6 is not a possibility. All right, Magnus, how do you want to continue? He begins knight c3, black castles, and then a3, driving back the bishop. All right, now Vishy, what do you want to do about this piece? You can take on c3, or go back to c5, or go back to a5. In the game, Vishy goes back one square to c5, a solid square for the piece. And now Magnus here, he simply plays the move e3. The idea being knight gd2, and then castling, finishing kingside development. Now, black plays d6, clamping down on d6, obviously, a solid idea. And white knight gd2, and black does take on d5 here. C takes d5 is the move. Now Magnus, he could recapture with the pawn or the knight, and he finds the stronger recapture, taking with the knight here. And there's a very specific reason why this move is better than capturing with the pawn, and we're about to find out what it is. All right, black, knight takes, then c takes, then knight d7, intending most likely knight to f6, very solid. Now castles, knight to f6, and here Magnus plays a very strong idea, again, bishop to c3. A little bit unusual, but Magnus here finding a very good square for his bishop where it slices down the long diagonal. And of course, the knight, it can always go to, say, f4 later, basically finding two very good squares for these pieces. All right, Vishy, bishop g4, pinning this knight on e2 to the queen on d1. All right, now here, Magnus, how do you want to continue? What is your middle game strategy? Here, if I was playing as white, I would consider moves like perhaps queen to c2 or d2, getting the queen out of the pin, off the back rank, and so on. But Magnus here shows why I am simply not on his level. He finds a beautiful combination that, to be honest, I would not even have considered in this position, as it just looks so bizarre to me. He plays the move bishop takes f6, giving up his very powerful bishop for the knight. Now, why on earth would he do this? It's very simple. He's trying to weaken the e4 pawn. All right, Black, what do you want to do? Here is the problem. If you capture with the pawn, you ruin your kingside pawn structure. But if you take with the queen, you lose the pawn on the e4 square sooner or later. In the game, Vishy takes with the queen. Queen takes. Now, of course, the queen, it does target b2, the weak pawn on b2. But here, Magnus, the next part of his idea is the move b4, gaining space with tempo, attacking the bishop, and of course, defending the b pawn. Is now on b4, where it's not under attack by the queen. All right, the bishop goes back to b6, bishop b6 played in the game, and then simply, bishop takes e4, winning that pawn on e4 for free. Magnus now being up a pawn in the middle game, but of course, all is not lost. Vishy here has those two b's, plus potentially a very strong attack against the white king on g1. All right, now, Vishy, how should he continue here? He plays the move a5, trying to gain space on the queen side and attack the weak pawn on b4. But this right here is actually a massive mistake. Vishy missing the chance to go h5, going full alpha 0, intending h4. And there are some tactical reasons why this move would have been a little bit stronger. Instead, a5 played in the game, the start of perhaps the wrong plan here. Now, Magnus, he takes on a5, b takes, and Black takes back with the rook. Rook takes, but this right here is exactly what Magnus wanted in this game. Young Magnus finds a beautiful combination, and if you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to find the absolutely beautiful idea for Magnus right here, right now, in this position. It is a shocker. And by the way, guys, real fast, this video is sponsored by me. If you are watching endless chess YouTube videos and not making any real progress with your online chess, trust me, I know the feeling and I have the solution. Go to drmikechess.com. Link is above, also down below in the pinned comment and so on. And here's the deal. I'm roughly a 2,000 ELO online player, and I know what it takes to improve as an amateur player. So if you are stuck trying to improve and not making any progress, go to drmikechess.com. It's my free community where I'll personally help you reach whatever goals you have in your chess journey. Now, back to the video. From here, of course, the rook on a5 is under attack, and Vishy, rook f to a8 is the move. And now Magnus, queen d4, sliding back with the queen and offering the queen trade. Magnus, being an expert endgame player, would be oh too happy to enter an endgame right here. And Vishy, he declines. Queen to f3, a very aggressive move. And now, of course, the threat from Vishy is simple. Bishop to h3, and then queen g2 checkmate. So Magnus here, he's got to respect the threat and find some way to block that. And of course, beyond that, queen takes e2 is also being threatened right here. All right, Magnus, you seize the threat, and the move is knight to c3. Okay, has this guy lost his mind? He's running away from the attack. He's not going knight f4. Instead, knight to c3. What does young Magnus have in mind? It's simple. Knight c3, and here, if Black were to go bishop h3, the move for white, this is a shocker, is queen to h4, hitting the king and the bishop. Magnus here, defending g2 tactically with this very strong queen move. Therefore, bishop h3 is not a threat yet. Instead, Vishy in the game, rook to e8 is the move, a solid idea, potentially threatening rook to e4 ideas. And now, Magnus, h3. Another very strong idea. Of course, the threat being if you take the pawn h3, then bang, queen to h4 again wins the bishop. Therefore, Black must go back, and in response, bishop f5 is the move. Now, we have queen to f6 flying up with the queen and potentially pinning the bishop on f5 to the queen on f3. And now, actually, g4 is technically being threatened. Black, king to g8 is the move. We have rook a to b1, threatening b7. And here, Vishy, in this position, Vishy Anand simply goes off the deep end and plays a truly bizarre move. I'm talking like Mikhail Tal level bizarre. All right, Vishy, in this position, he plays the rook sack, rook takes e3. Has Vishy lost his mind, giving up the rook for a pawn? What on earth is the idea by Vishy? Why on earth would he play this? It's very simple. Here, if Magnus takes on e3 with the f pawn, f takes e3, That would be a massive blunder, as queen takes g3 essentially gives black a winning attack. So instead, here, young Magnus, he ignores the rook and instead plays the very strong move, rook takes b7, winning the pawn on b7 instead. Now, Vishy, bishop c8, attacks the rook, also the queen on f6. Magnus, queen d8, hits the king, king g7, and then simply queen takes c8, winning the bishop. Of course, here, the knight on c3 is also under attack, and that knight does fall. Rook takes c3 is the move, and now the queen on c8 is under attack of Magnus. All right, Magnus, in this position, move 30. What do you want to do here as white? What is the idea? Where do you move your queen? Or do you move your queen at all? In this position, Magnus, he does not move the queen. Instead, the move here, an absolute shocker, rook takes f7. Magnus Carlsen, what have you done? What on earth is the idea behind this? First of all, obviously, if the queen takes, white takes on c3 with the attack on the king and the rook, and he wins the game. So instead, king takes is forced immediately. Now, what is the idea? Queen d7 hits the king, king to f6, and then queen to d8 with the double attack on the rook and the king. Magnus giving up his rook, winning a pawn, and winning back the rook with the extra pawn consolidated. Wow, beautiful stuff. All right, queen d8, king to f5, queen takes a5, rook takes a3, and then queen to b4. Magnus here consolidates with the two extra pawns in the endgame. King d5, queen d2, flying back, rook d3, queen g5, hits the king, queen to f5, blocks the check, and here, rook to e1, king takes, queen takes, g takes, and then king g2. Magnus trading down into a rook and pawn endgame, where black does have the passed pawn on d6, which actually is a very serious threat. Magnus, of course, being the greatest endgame player ever, is still favored to win, but Vishy here certainly has his chances. All right, rook to a3, the rook slides over, h4 is the move, king d4, h5, d5, h6, rook to a7, king to f3, rook h7, black attacking the pawn, rook to e6, defends the pawn, king c3, now rook c6, king d3, king to f4, attacks f5. Magnus here slowly but surely closing in on his Indian prey. Rook to f7 defends the pawn, king g5, marching down the board, king d2, and now the last move of the game, rook d6. And in this position, Vishy Anand, despite being one of the greatest players ever, he has to resign to Magnus, as there's simply no stopping the idea of taking on d5 and then pushing this pawn down the board to victory with the king. Wow, what a game between Magnus Carlsen and Vishy Anand in the 2008 Amber Rapid Tournament. All right, Chess YouTube, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please show me some love. Smash that like button, comment down below. And by the way, guys, if you want to get better at online chess really fast, I mean like screaming fast, and learn from a 2,000 plus ELO player like myself, go to my free online chess community, drmychess.com. Links above and down below in the pinned comment and so on. I have so many amazing resources there to help you out, between free opening courses, free group coaching, free game reviews, and so on. I mean, there are so many ways there to get better at chess. My best students there are crushing it. My best student, Umar, gained literally 400 ELO in August alone. And I have so many other amazing case studies. Again, if you want to get very, very fast results, simply go to drmychess.com. Again, links above and down below. And that's all I got. As always, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond. And God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.